Greetings, fellow detectives. Wizard Kitten here, bringing you a new Nancy Drew analysis video. Today's video is brought to you by the patrons over at Mystique Manor and by all the official Fellow Detective channel members. If you too would like to support the channel and gain access to exclusive features, check out patreon.com/wizardkitten to become a patron, or click join next to the subscribe button to become an official fellow detective. During this year's Nancy Drew Streamathon, I've received a number of incredible video ideas in the chat, this one included. I have already tackled Nancy Drew culprits from many different angles in previous videos by exploring the best and least endings, as well as the means, motives, and opportunities of culprits. When I got the request to explore the evilness of the culprits, I wasn't sure if I would be able to share any new information that I hadn't already discussed. But after an inspirational hike through the woods, my best thinking spot, I am now very excited to make this video. The idea of what makes a culprit evil is incredibly interesting to me. I think it's highly likely that we all have varying definitions of evil, and varying opinions on what makes a culprit sympathetic or not. It's a highly philosophical question when it comes down to it. Moral good and bad, right and wrong. It's a whole can of worms. This is just my interpretation, gathered through woodland promenading. So just remember that there are no right or wrong answers to this question, just a wide range of thoughts and opinions. From this point on, perhaps obviously, there is spoiler potential for all 33 Nancy Drew games, culprits, endings, and plot included. You have been warned, this is a very spoiler-heavy video. And moving on. My first thought was that the Nancy Drew culprits can roughly be categorized into 4 different groups. 1. Sympathetic culprits. 2. Culprits who are sympathetic but were still very much in the wrong. 3. Culprits being just plain bad. And 4. Evil culprits. Let's start first with the largest and for the most part easiest to define group. The culprits who are being just plain bad. These culprits are carrying out actions that are primarily designed to benefit them financially or with power and fame. Their direct objective is not to maliciously hurt people in general or a specific person, but their actions do often indirectly hurt people. They just don't care all that much. This is what separates them from the evil culprits because they are somewhat emotionally separated from their crimes. It's more day-to-day crime than it is cruel, unusual, obsessive crime. These culprits are not, however, sympathetic either. They don't show remorse for their actions. Their actions are due almost entirely to their own greed and self-interest, and they are willing to hurt people along the way, if necessary, to get what they want. This group includes 22 culprits. Mitch Dillon and Detective Beach from Secrets Can Kill and Secrets Can Kill Remastered, Lewis Chandler from Message in a Haunted Mansion, Lisa Ostrom from Treasure in the Royal Tower, Taylor Sinclair from Secret of the Scarlet Hand, Emily Griffin from Ghost Dogs of Moon Lake, Elliot Chen from The Haunted Carousel, Andy Jason from Danger on Deception Island, Shorty Thurmond from Secret of Shadow Ranch, Jane Willoughby, aka Marion Aborn from Secret of the Old Clock, Laurie Gerard from Last Train to Blue Moon Canyon, Minette from Danger by Design, Mike and Pua Mapu from Creature of Kapu Cave, Yanni Volkstaya from White Wolf of Icicle Creek, Helena Berg from Phantom of Venice, Johnny Roll, aka Dwayne Powers from Ransom of the Seven Ships, Scott Varnell from Trail of the Twister, Ewan McLeod from The Silent Spy, Kiri Need from The Shattered Medallion, Thanos and Xenia Dukas from Labyrinth of Lies, and Alicia Cole from Midnight in Salem. The classical era and Renaissance era culprits in this category are pretty straightforward. They want money, fortune, power, or fame, and they're doing something bad to try and get it without directly targeting people. Lewis causes accidents at the Golden Gardenia. Emily scares people off with her ghost dogs. Yanni causes accidents at Icicle Creek Lodge, etc. All these culprits are doing something greedy and selfish that ends up hurting people even if it wasn't their primary objective, and none of them are sorry about it. A few culprits from the modern era, as well as Scott Varnell from the Renaissance era, may need a little more explaining. Scott could have ended up in the sympathetic but still very much in the wrong category because eagle-eyed detectives can see some remorse from Scott. However, this is not something that he admits and likely isn't even truly conscious of. Scott maintains that the whole world is out to get him and that he's the victim in his story. He's brilliant and has never gotten the respect that he deserves. His college won't grant him tenure. Krollmeister won't fund him properly. His students are all lazy and inept. Nobody cares about his work, etc. He does nothing to self-reflect on how his arrogance and disdain for others is actually the thing causing all of his problems. If there were truly outside forces making Scott's life more difficult, then I could perhaps sympathize with him. But there aren't any outside forces. Scott is being held accountable by people for his harmful behavior, and he does nothing to reflect or change. So now he's a bad guy, and it's nobody's fault but his own. Ewan, Kiri, Thanos, and Xenia are all written like they are supposed to be evil villains. Kiri and Xenia both, for example, have these big, weird monologues at the end where they boast about their brilliance and Nancy's comparative lack of brilliance. These moments are definitely supposed to read like scary villain speeches, but they just aren't because the rest of their respective mysteries do not set them up to be nearly as intimidating as the game wants us to believe. This happens with Thanos as well. We're supposed to believe that he's terrifying and could literally kill us at any minute, but there isn't any follow-through there. Sorry, but a man who growls at me while he's in a cage isn't scaring me. Combine this with the fact that the motives are really underdeveloped, if they're even there at all, for all four of these villains. You can't pretend that a character is evil if the writing doesn't support it, even if their actions are entirely reprehensible, like Ewan using Nancy's mom as bait to help Revenant, or Kiri cutting the rope bridge and seriously injuring George. Clarify and strengthen the motives, add some emotional weight to the character interactions to make things more personal, and then maybe I'll believe that these characters could be evil. Until then, they're just regular ol' bad guys. Let's talk now about the culprits who are sympathetic but are still very much in the wrong. These characters are doing some bad things and need to be held accountable for their actions. There is absolutely no denying that. However, these culprits are interesting because it is clear that outside forces likely shoved them in the direction of doing bad things. If those outside forces hadn't been there or had been mitigated in some way, it's entirely possible that these characters wouldn't have been quite as bad. We can sympathize with them because, while their actions and choices are still their own, there was some significant negative influence in their lives. This group includes 5 culprits: Joseph Hughes from The Final Scene, Corinne Myers from Warnings at Waverly Academy, Niobe Papadaki and Grigor Karakinos from Labyrinth of Lies, and Soren Bergerson from Sea of Darkness. In the cases of Corinne and Soren, we see significant negative social pressure contributing to their desire to seek revenge. Even before the Black Cat debacle, Corinne was socially maligned by her peers. They openly expressed their animosity towards Corinne via text and out loud to basically anyone who can hear. She has few allies, and even those who are somewhat kind to her aren't exactly sticking out their necks to vocally express support. This also happens to Soren. He has been treated like an outsider his entire life, the people of Skipbrat openly being unkind and actively excluding him from social events. Again, any allies that he has are almost reluctant and are doing little to compensate for the mistreatment that he has faced. Had either of these characters experienced less social ostracizing, then perhaps they wouldn't have been driven to the point of desperate revenge. Their actions were still horrifying, and they need to be held accountable, but sympathy should certainly be made available to them. They aren't imagining things when they say they've been mistreated. It's easy to see even as Nancy, and while they are still 100% accountable for their choices and how they responded, it's easy to see how they got where they did. Joseph is an interesting case because his whole life basically fell apart all at once. He finds out that the theater that he has worked at and cared for literally his entire life is going to be demolished. He has no family, something that hits him hard when he finds out that his only living relative, his brother, has already passed. He feels entirely alone and without purpose. It was a perfect storm of hopelessness that hit quite suddenly and all at once, compounded with the fact that he had no one to turn to. His actions are certainly wrong, and his separation from reality is terrifying, but I have to sympathize for a man who loses literally everything in his life all at once. Niobe and Grigor both got taken advantage of and got caught up in a situation that they simply couldn't keep up with. They are absolutely still in the wrong here and need to be held accountable, because once they realized what was happening, they could have done something to get out. They could have reported it, they could have left, they could have done anything. But out of fear and desperation, they didn't. Both were in fragile states, emotionally and financially, and so it was easy for Thanos and Xenia to manipulate them into doing what they wanted. It's easy to imagine how scared and hopeless they must have felt. When it comes down to it, though, in the very end, they tried to do the right thing. They tried to protect and help Nancy. They could have made much better and different choices along the way, but their mistakes can be viewed through a lens of sympathy. There are, however, two characters that I think we can all sympathize more fully with. This is the smallest of the categories, including only Jane Penvalen from Curse of Blackmore Manor and Fiona Malloy from Haunting of Castle Malloy. First, we can sympathize more fully with Jane because she is literally just a child. She is only 12 years old, and she has been through an awful lot with little to no support. She almost never sees her biological mother. Her biological father jet sets away with almost no notice to other countries. Her great-aunt actively prohibits and is annoyed by anything childlike that Jane dares to do, and her new stepmother is struggling with her own mental health and is incredibly distant and even rude towards Jane. She doesn't have any friends her own age at Blackmore, and essentially only gets to spend time with her tutor and an octogenarian parrot. She is lonely, desperately lonely. She's also a little too smart, so much so that her outreaches for attention end up being way more effective than I think most 12-year-olds would be able to manage. She does incredibly dangerous things when she's acting out her cries for attention. But no matter how clever she is, Jane is still just a child, unable to truly understand the depths of the harm that she was perpetrating. I feel really sorry for Jane, and while her actions were wrong, it's clear that she just needs some love. Similarly, we can sympathize more fully with Fiona Malloy, who lost her home and both of her parents in a tragic explosion when she was just a girl. After this already extremely traumatic experience, Fiona wandered the bog and was taken in by a woman who lived as a hermit in a bog hut. This essentially ensured that Fiona didn't get the professional, mental, and emotional help that she almost certainly needed, and was instead placed in a situation where she became socially isolated, a complete recluse. She's been alone for years and years by the time that Matt stumbles into her father's workshop. Without full control of her faculties and suffering from extreme social neglect, Fiona doesn't let him go. She keeps him, but at least she feeds him carrots and potatoes. It's easy to see how desperate Fiona was for interaction and how lonely she felt. She also didn't commit her crime on purpose. Matt fell down a hole of his own accord. Fiona didn't lure him there. All in all, it's very easy to sympathize with her. But now it's on to the final category, the evil culprits, the ones who we cannot sympathize with and who are instead actively terrifying. These culprits are defined by their cruel and evil deeds. Their crime has some level of closeness to it, in that their direct intention is usually, but not always, to hurt someone. If that isn't their direct intention, then they land in this category by being perfectly okay with emotionally manipulating and hurting someone to get what they want, almost to a sociopathic extent. They treat others as completely disposable. That alone makes for a pretty evil crime, but the level of evil can be further defined by the level of the initial offense. Many of the culprits within this category go to extreme lengths to exact revenge for comparatively minuscule offenses. Culprits in this category also have a certain separation from reality, where they believe so fully that their evil is justified that they are beyond reasoning. This is terrifying and what makes for a truly villainous culprit. So who fits this category? 8 culprits to be exact, including Dwayne Powers from Stay Tuned for Danger, Renee Amond from Legend of the Crystal Skull, Rentaro Ahara from Shadow at the Water's Edge, Anya Mittelmeier from The Captive Curse, Brenda Carlton from Alibi and Ashes, Abdullah Bakum from Tomb of the Last Queen, Victor Lawsett from The Deadly Device, and Clara Thornton from Ghost of Thornton Hall. Dwayne, Anya, Brenda, Victor, and Clara all commit crimes that are directly intended to hurt, even murder, people. Dwayne's threats and attacks on Rick can easily be described as traumatic. He wants to terrify Rick, and as he steadily loses sanity, he grows closer and closer to wanting to maim or kill Rick. Anya handles her breakup by lying on her resume to get a job so that she can infiltrate her ex-boyfriend's business and destroy him from within with completely falsified information. That's a cruel and unusual overreaction, to say the least. Brenda orchestrates a complete and utter teardown of Nancy and her career, getting her arrested and very nearly killing her in a fire, all because Nancy was better at her job than Brenda was. Once again, a cruel and unusual overreaction. Victor murders his friend and colleague in cold blood for fortune. That's evil. Clara hates how beloved Charlotte is and is so full of greed when she finds out that she's removed from Charlotte's will that she kills her in a fire. It may have been an accident and she may have just wanted to scare Charlotte, but lighting a house on fire while your cousin is inside of it is cruel and evil, regardless of the outcome that you're expecting. These people are absolutely terrifying. Just reading that paragraph gave me the chills. Renee lands in the evil category because, while her initial intention wasn't to kill Dr. Bollé, that's exactly what she did by fabricating a note saying that the crystal skull was fake. What solidifies her placement in this category is that she has no remorse for the unintentional outcome. She casually calls it regrettable, all the while cruelly bad-mouthing and manipulating Henry, the intended recipient of the skull. She believes herself entirely justified and Dr. Bollé entirely disposable. And that's evil and terrifying. Abdullah's actual crime is really just tomb robbing and selling artifacts on the black market, which is bad but not quite enough to make him evil. What does make him evil, though, is his treatment of Lily. He intentionally hires an accomplice who he knows is emotionally vulnerable and who will be unable to quit or report him. There is a vast power dynamic difference here. Lily has absolutely no power, and Abdullah has so much clout within the archaeological world that he could destroy Lily and her career in a second, which he makes clear to her. He also verbally abuses Lily, shouting at her for the slightest ineptitude. He also seems to relish this power dynamic and shows no remorse for his actions or his treatment of Lily. She could be easily discarded and he wouldn't even raise an eyebrow. And that's evil and terrifying. Finally, Rentaro Ehara lands in this category because he uses the memory of his girlfriend's dead mother to haunt her and her entire family in an effort to get her to leave the Ryokan with him. This is so beyond manipulative that I can't call it anything but evil. Rentaro deliberately orchestrates terrifying hauntings that ruin the Shimizu family business, traumatizes guests, and even more severely traumatizes Miwako, Yumi, and Takai. Just imagine being haunted by the vengeful and extremely angry spirit of your mother. Now imagine that your boyfriend is behind it. Hard nope. So, there you have it, fellow detectives. My thoughts on what makes for the most and least evil culprits in the Nancy Drew series. To refresh, I believe that the 8 evil culprits are the most evil. Go figure. And the least evil culprits are our 7 culprits of varying sympathy, with Jane and Fiona being the least evil. All the other 22 bad guys fall somewhere in the middle. I did notice several interesting trends while making this video, like that uncomplicated straight-up bad guys are easily the most common type of culprit within the Nancy Drew series. These culprits are also most likely to be found within the classical and Renaissance eras. I also find it interesting that we have a string of 6 mysteries in a row, starting with Shadow at the Water's Edge, where the culprits are evil. Methinks a certain writer was a bit of a fan of creating highly villainous villains. I'm tempted to say that more complicated culprits, either more evil and more sympathetic, are better than a standard uncomplicated culprit, but I don't know if that's true. While I find many of the evil and sympathetic culprits interesting, they still don't always make the ending of the mystery more intense or exciting. For example, I think that the endings of Danger on Deception Island and Secret of Shadow Ranch are much better than Tomb of the Lost Queen or The Captive Curse, despite the latter two having more evil villains. Ultimately, I don't believe that a story can solely rely on the power of its villain. All of the puzzle pieces need to fit together, and it's entirely possible to write a quote-unquote villain without them actually functioning as an evil culprit. See Labyrinth of Lies and The Silent Spy. Regardless, this video was really fun to make, and I am now very interested in exploring some of the evil non-culprits in the series. So let me know if that's a video that you would like to see. I'd also love to hear what your thoughts are on how I sorted the culprits. Do you agree with my categories and where the culprits landed? What do you think defines an evil culprit or a sympathetic one? Let a Wizard Kitten know in the comments section down below. If you really enjoyed this video, please consider hitting that like button or tipping me for the video with a super thanks next to the download button right beneath the video. If you would like to come join a fantastic group of fellow detectives at Mystique Manor as a patron for the channel, gain access to exclusive content, and support the making of more content like this, please check out patreon.com/wizardkitten. I also have channel memberships with exclusive badges and emojis to use during streams and in the comment section. If you'd like to support the channel by becoming an official fellow detective, click join next to the subscribe button. Please feel free to follow the channel on Instagram or Discord, linked in the description box down below. And as always, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more Nancy Drew and Sims 4 content. Thank you so much for watching, fellow detectives. I will see you soon.